Dr. Sfeir. بدك نبلش بس فادر فادي يمكن بده يعوز كمبيوتر اذا بدك نبلش بنحط بس هون تعذرني.
Good morning. Thanks, Madam Bustani. Thanks for the Maronite International Foundation and the USEK University, the Holy Spirit University, our main Maronite university, you know. It's a great pleasure to me to be among you, just to not to speak and receive from you, because you have your experience in your country where you live and where you did study or you're still studying, your approaches about the system, the political and the constitutional system. Effectively, you know, your grandfather and mother country, Lebanon, is something unique, you know, because unique in constitutional law, in political institutions, in all public mechanism concerning the constitution of the government, of the parliament, how the Lebanese govern themselves. Just for info, I would like to know from where you come. Please, briefly. Australia. Canada. From Ontario or from Ontario? From Ottawa. It's my city. Yes, because I used to study at the University of Ottawa. International business law. 1990 till 2001. And I'm Canadian citizen too. Yes. Australia. I have my cousins in Sydney, my close cousins. UK. Peru. Great. Mexico. Where in the States? Ohio. Cleveland? Cleveland. Great. Sydney. And Johannesburg or Cape Town? I have my close uncle, my uncle in Klerksdorp, and my other cousins in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, and all over, you know, from the Shalala family. Toronto. Brazil. Bolivia, from the first generation. Yes. Uruguay. Yes. Ecuador. We have very big family of Sfeir family in Ecuador. Yes, more than 800. Mexico. Sorry? France. De Paris ou de Strasbourg? Pierreson, okay. Okay. We have les apôtres. Vous avez les apôtres, n'est-ce pas? Apostles. Maronite apostles. Mission. Madame? Canada, Ottawa too? Great. Please. Sydney. LA. De Paris. Alors, vos pères ou vos grands-pères étaient là? Ah, vous êtes la seconde génération, c'est-à-dire. C'est un plaisir. À Montréal. France aussi. Montréal. Montréal aussi. Alors, les francophones sont là. Madame? Vancouver. On Pacific Ocean. Toronto. Sydney. Two. Toronto. Then you're very welcome in your country. You know, I don't know, even I'm in international law, but I'm not specialized in all systems. But I know the confederation system of Canada and Australia, because it's something very, very different when you have a central government and the government for each province or for each state. It's something very different with a parliament here, federal parliament and provincial parliament. Here in Lebanon is very different, you know. As introduction, you know, the constitution, the Lebanese Constitution was promulgated on 1926 after the creation of the state of Great Lebanon under the French mandate. Even it was amended, is still in force today. Its main feature is the representation given to the various religious communities. You know, it's something specific to Lebanon. These religious communities will be compulsory, represented in public employment, in the formation of the government, and in the selection of the parliament. This constitution of 1926, even amended, is still in force, guarantees basic individual rights, basic freedoms, and provides for a parliamentary form of government, where we have a parliament and a government taking his confidence from this parliament. The major amendments agreed in 1989, Tariff Agreement. Did you know about it? Tariff Agreement shifted the balance of executive power from the president, from the Maronite President of the Republic, to the Council of Ministers. It was the balance of the war. In 2008, following security incidents, an agreement among the main political parties was concluded in Doha, in Qatar, under the patronage of the Saudi Arabia, Syria, the Arab League, and so far, European Union and the States. This agreement reflected as de facto acknowledgement that no major decisions by the Lebanese government, any Lebanese government, can be made without the consent of all major communities and political parties. What's known in Lebanon, the perpetual consensus. On September the 1st, 1920, Lebanon came into existence as a separate political entity under the French mandate. On May 23, and you know, on September the 1st, the main role was played by our late great patriarch, Monsignor Lies Al-Hwayik, you know, the father of the great Lebanon. Then our Maronite Patriarchate played and still playing a great role in the constitution and in the saving of Lebanon as free country. On 1926, the first constitution has been promulgated by the French High Commissioner in Beirut and adopted by the Lebanese Representative Council. Briefly, the articles of this constitution describes, first, Lebanon is an independent state within its territorial boundaries, as recognized by France and the League of Nations. You know, the League of Nations is the former United Nations, but it was established in London after the First World War. Second, the establishment of a parliamentary form of government based on democratic principles of protection of individual rights and freedoms. B, separations of powers between the parliament, executive, and judicial. 3, the rule of law. this constitution adopts the principle of equality. Article 7 stipulates all Lebanese are equal before the law. They enjoy equal civil and political party rights and are subject to public duties and obligation without distinction among them. All theory calling or denominating Lebanon as a religious country is false. Lebanon is a civil state, but based on religious communities' representation. It's very different. Our rules are civil, as in Canada, in Australia, and everywhere. And it was the first country in this region, because you know, with the Islamism, after the First World War, it was very different, you know. The establishment of a civil rule was not so easy, because all constitutions in Syria, Egypt, and all over the Arab world were based on Sharia law. The source of legislation was the Sharia. The unique characteristics of the Lebanese constitution, its requirement to have the religious community represented. Then the Lebanese political system is characterized by the confessional regime, like a community federation. Tariff Agreement reinforced the role of religious affiliations in the political structure of government. Concerning the rights and freedoms, our constitution consecrates many rights. For example, individual freedom, rights against detention. No crimes or punishments can be established except by law. The right to private ownership. The Constitution guarantees the following freedoms. First, religious freedom in all its manifestations. Freedom of belief is absolute. Free exercise of religious rights. Respect religious interest and personal status laws. Freedom of education. Freedom of speech. Freedom of association. Freedom of the press. Even we were under the Syrian occupation in Lebanon. This freedom still in force strongly. And the positions of our great patriarch, Cardinal Sfeir, were very, very helpful to save this spirit of freedom in Lebanon. The separation of powers. You know, the powers in Lebanon are divided into 3 branches. First one, the parliament, legislative. The second is the executive. The third is the judicial. Concerning the parliament, the Constitution of 1926 originally vested the legislative power in a parliament composed of 2 separate bodies, a Senate and a Chamber of Deputies. Actually, the parliament consists of 128 members because the Senate was abolished. The principle is every citizen, every Lebanese citizen of 21 years or older has the right to vote. Every Lebanese citizen who has 25 years old and older or older has the right to be a candidate. The powers of the Lebanese parliament. Our parliament can legislate, elect the president of the republic, approve the formation of the government, vote ministers out of the office, approve the annual budget, and ratify certain treaties. Quorum is always required for the legality of meetings. Regular one, simple one, the simple majority for regular affairs meetings, and 2/3 of the total number of deputies for meetings concerning the amendments of the Constitution. The provisions of the Constitution are not clear on the issue of the quorum needed to elect a president. It's a big issue, a big problem. What's the quorum? The 2/3 or the simple majority? The text is not clear. Executive branch. In the Constitution of 1926, the executive power was vested to the President of the Republic with the assistance of the ministers. Actually, with Tariff Agreement, things are very different and more critical and complicated. The President of the Republic had the power to appoint and dismiss the Prime Minister and the ministers, preside over meetings of the Cabinet, make appointments to public office, negotiate and conclude international treaties, propose new legislation, promulgate the laws as approved by the Parliament, remit to Parliament for reconsideration all kind of laws that the Parliament has already approved. Finally, the President had the power to dissolve the Parliament. Actually, the President has the power to appoint the Prime Minister following compulsory consultancies with the members of the Parliament, participating with the Prime Minister in the formation of the Cabinet. It's something critical. Negotiate and conclude some international treaties, preside over meeting of the Cabinet at his convenience. The President of the Council of Ministers is from which community? The Prime Minister, Sunni, will be participating with the President in the formation of the Cabinet, presiding over Cabinet meetings, representing the Cabinet before the Parliament, and finally exercising oversight of the work of the ministers. The third branch is the judicial power, is exercised in Lebanon by the courts of all levels and jurisdictions. The conditions and limits of judicial guarantees shall be determined by law. Judges, by principle, are independent in the exercise of their duties. But the executive branch, through the Ministry of Justice, can play a major role in the appointment, promotion, and reassignment of judges, which brings the independence of this power, the judiciary power, as a separate branch into question. In 1990 amendment, after Tariff Agreement, a constitutional council was established with limited jurisdiction and restricted areas to its review. Under this amendment, only the President, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Prime Minister, and a minimum of 10 deputies have the right to petition the court for review of the constitutionality of laws and resolution of disputes arising out of presidential or parliamentary elections. In addition, the heads of the recognized religious communities were also given the right to petition the court on matters related specifically to personal status, freedom of belief, freedom of education, the exercise of religious rights, and freedom of religious education. In Lebanon, the law recognizes 19 religious communities. It's the diversity of Lebanon. Actually, the religious minorities enjoyed historically a great deal of autonomy and freedom under the protection of Sharia law before, allowing Christians of various denominations and other groups to survive the persecution committed against them from time to time by the rulers of Islamic State. To ensure some level of equilibrium among all the components of the new state, Article 95 of the Constitution addressed the issue by stipulating that. And as a temporary measure, and for the sake of justice and concord, the religious communities shall be represented by equity in public employment and the formation of the government without causing harm to the interest of the states. It's like a balance between the representation of the religious communities and the civil law of the state. The National Pact of 1943. Did you hear about it? The National Pact. Who speaks Arabic? Al-Mithaq al-Watani. What does it mean, Al-Mithaq al-Watani? Sorry? I don't. In English, yeah, okay. But what does it mean? Under the French mandate, Lebanon was not an independent state on the eyes of international law, the League of Nations. We were under the French mandate. In 1943, two political leaders, the Maronite President Bashar al-Khoury and the Sunni Muslim Prime Minister Riyad Saleh, orally agreed to end the French mandate. Their agreement became known as Al-Mithaq al-Watani. In addition, to understand the spirit of this national pact, everyone has to go back to 1920. The majority of Muslims in Lebanon identified themselves as Arabs, with an aspiration to unite with Syria and the rest of the Arab lands. Most Christians identified themselves as Lebanese, with an aspiration to maintain a close and special relationships with the West in general and France in particular as their protectors. Actually, it's very different because we have no protectors actually. We have to struggle to save the freedom of Lebanon, to protect our future in this country. Bashar al-Khoury and Riyad Saleh realized the importance of dealing with this national identity crisis in a manner to both Christians and Muslims, if their efforts to end the mandate were to be successful. The solution they offered was to acknowledge the Arab face to Lebanon. Lebanon تواجه عربي. The Arab face, something special, you know. What does it mean? Lebanon has an Arab face in the Constitution. Lebanon ذو وجه عربي. He had the Arab face and the European hair and the American heart. It's not legally, it's not something normal. We are an Arab country, yes or no. There is no in between in identity. France is in the European Union. UK just withdrew, right? In other words, they offered Christians and Muslims a compromise, whereby Christians would accept their Arab identity and Muslims would accept their Lebanese identity. It was a kind of concession. This one is the consensus. It's the National Pact of 1943. Finally, the Tariff Agreement. You know, from 1975 and maybe before, the state of Lebanon was split into ghettos, governed by the Palestinian armed organizations, and later on by Lebanese militias, and all over by the Syrian army for the 2/3 of Lebanon, and by the Israeli occupation in the south and Bekaa, in the south of Bekaa. This was very, very dangerous for the state of Lebanon and took place from 1976 and lasted until 1989, when the surviving deputies elected on 1972 met in Ta'if in Saudi Arabia and agreed on Ta'if concession. The Tariff Agreement required, and the House of Deputies adopted, the following amendment to the Constitution. A provision stipulating that no legal aspect to any authority that contradicts the Pact of coexistence, of consensus between Christians and Muslims. The necessity of a 2/3 vote by the cabinet on major decisions to save this consensus. The creation of, as I said, of a constitutional council. The distribution of the seats of the House of Deputies equally between Christians and Muslims and proportionally among each of them. The creation of a Senate where all religious communities are to be represented. But till now, we don't have a Senate. Under the Tariff Agreement, the President is the Supreme Commander of the Army. But the Army is under the authority of the Council of Ministers. It's something paradox. Doha Agreement on 2008. It's not related to the text of the Constitution of Ta'if, like Tariff Agreement. It's something different. It's a political agreement. It's not a constitutional one. Following the withdrawal of Syria in 2005, a constitutional crisis developed between a Sunni-dominated the cabinet and a Shiite-dominated opposition, resulting in the withdrawal of all Shiite representatives from the government. Security incidents took place. Doha Agreement on 2008 held all parties of Lebanon and agreed to elect a consensus candidate to the post of the president. He was a General Michel Sleiman, our former president, to form a national unity government in which the opposition has veto power over major decisions. In reality, the Doha Agreement was an acknowledgement that no major decisions to the Lebanese government can be effective without the consent of all major religious communities and influential parties, regardless of how large the majority supporting the government and the House of Deputies may be. In conclusion, Lebanon is a republic of continuous concessions among Lebanese and reflecting the regional and international equation and agendas. Thanks.
I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to know why does the president has to be absolutely a Maronite in Lebanon?
Why?
The president has to be a Maronite.
You know, the representation of religious communities in the government is something adopted orally in the National Pact, and with Tariff Agreement, it's something written, just to save a balance between the communities in the system and the powers and in all branches of the political and constitutional system. Without this stipulation or this text, problems will be very dangerous on Christian presence and their capacities, the capabilities to share in the government of Lebanon. Because of the majority first, because they lost the majority of people. Second, because of the immigration. Third, because of the geopolitical situation of Lebanon, where, you know, the constitution of the Arab societies.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there a way we can abolish the Tariff Agreement? Like, can we
Abolish, no, but
Or like-
there is a way to modernize the text of Tariff. And really we need this revision, these amendments, to just because after 26 years we have many things to modernize, to set up new system, maybe not new political system, but new systems, new mechanism of powers between the branches of government. Yes, we need to modify Tariff Agreement. We need, but not to abolish it, because it needs a new war, and we are not ready to do it. It was so costly. And for that reason, your fathers and grandfathers left Lebanon from the reasons, right? Please.
What is the hesitancy in electing a new president to lead the country? Because it's been a few years since that has happened. So can you just elaborate a little bit on that, please? The hesitancy of electing a new...
Sorry, the voice is not clear.
Electing a new president.
Actually,
Yes, like one who's in power.
from 2014, we don't have a president. It's the question.
That's the question.
Why we cannot elect?
Why is there hesitancy? Why we can't go forward?
Because you know we are under political pressures inside between the Lebanese communities and outside after Syria problems happened from March 2011, and now you know the war in Syria is very strong and crucial, and we need a concession in Lebanon to elect a new president. It's not a matter of the constitutional text. It's not a matter of, as I said, our problems are not related to the constitutional text. Our problems are caused by political problems between communities, parties, political personalities, you know. And it's not a secret. I can tell you openly that the problem in Lebanon, the major problem, is the corruption. is the interference between politics and business. Just for your info, the Credit Suisse Group, the wealth management in the world, and it was described in Forbes lately, 8,000 Lebanese citizens own 50% of the wealth of Lebanon. % of the wealth of Lebanon. Assets, capital, everything. 50%. فضيحة.
Thank you very much. We will stop for a coffee break now.
It's a pleasure.
Please take the machines of the translation with you and leave it up on the door with Maya.